Okay. So someone posted a comment on one of the videos, and it kind of reminded me of something. And the comment was about I think it was about the words used were the I thought. And if I'm correct, I think what that refers to is the most fundamental aspect of the self. So I'll just describe, or trying to explain, based on my experience, a model of this. And what I noticed. So it starts to after. So basically, the way it happened for me. So initially, there is a realization. The realization that's clear enough to see the illusory nature of this self, this story, this individual, this life, this finite separate entity. And it's described in terms of, or I could describe it by saying, initially we were identified with the story, we're wrapped up in a story, we're fully identified with thought. We fully assume that these thoughts refer to something real, and that something real is this me, this separate person that consists of a past, a future, thoughts, and a body. And with the initial shift, it's seen clearly that the thoughts are a fiction, and that to which the thoughts refer to is also a fiction, as in the self, the me that's created by thought. That is an assumed thing that lives along a timeline and has a past and a future. We don't find any of that in our experience unless it's a thought. And the illusory nature of thought becomes extremely obvious. The pattern, the function, the truth that the thoughts only refer to other thoughts. The thoughts don't actually refer to anything that can be found. In a simple way of saying this, although it's not, it's a limited way of talking about it, is that we initially are identified with this me that's made of thought, and we move out of that and we identify with what it is that's aware of the thought. Or you could say we identify as the awareness behind the thought. And noticing that the thoughts and the stories only appear within awareness. Also, everything in our experience appears within this awareness. So it becomes obvious that this that is aware is the self, is us, is the most fundamental part of our being or our identity. And when I make statements like this, it seems like a conclusion, like I'm talking about something. I'm not really talking about anything that can be talked about, because we don't know what this is. We don't know what this awareness. We call it awareness, or we call it the awareness of being, or the presence, or existence, or consciousness. All these words refer to the same thing, but it's not a thing. It's a quality of existence. It's the fundamental basis of all experience, all reality. And that becomes so obvious in our experience that it's undeniable that that is what we are at a fundamental level. And that we are transcends all of the story, the thought, the experience. Everything that we are aware of appears within awareness. The awareness has to be what we are. In simple terms, that's how I can describe it. And what came with that for me is a sense of, without being too weird about it, an extremely expansive homecoming feeling, a remembering, waking up out of a dream, and it has a sense of course I remember what I am. Of course I'm not this person. And it came for me with what seemed like memories. I can describe it in the terms of, like, you know how if you smell a specific smell, or taste a specific taste, or hear a song, and you think that reminds me of this time, maybe in childhood, and not so much the contents of that memory in specific terms, but the emotional charge of it, the emotional flavour of it, that feeling that's quite visceral. You feel it in the body, and it's strong and it's deep. These memories started to flood in that they didn't have form, they had energy, they had feeling, and they weren't necessarily memories from this lifetime. And I think that's what people mean when they say they became aware of past lives. It certainly has that kind of feeling to it. But my point with that is that in seeing clearly the illusion of this personal story, in seeing for a time that the fiction of me is a fiction, and it always was a fiction, the emotional residue that fiction has built up, that seems to live in the body, it's built up through repetition, let's say, and habit of identification, continues on after the illusion has been broken, and it continues to kind of unwind in the body, as in what we were repressing, what these structures of identity were attempting to control in our experience, in our emotional body, are released and can be felt fully and can move through the body and our experience freely. And I think that's what some people mean when they talk about the Kundalini energy. It feels like these blockages are being released, and energy is flowing through the body and releasing these build-ups that are a result of the structure of identity. If I can just make a a model of it there. It's probably not accurate, but it kind of gives an idea. So but it feels like there's an escape. It's the moving outwards, an escape from this confined prison of identity into something much larger. It's a kind of movement out. It feels like a release, it feels like a relief, and it feels like an escape. We're escaping out of this confined individual, this illusory unit, this illusory story, into what we truly are. Being the awareness before the awareness becomes a person. Or the awareness before the awareness becomes aware of itself as a person. Just the awareness. Just the aliveness. Non-conceptual, non-confined by the limits of stories and relation. Unconfined by the limits of identification. But we move into, or at least for me, I moved into the fundamental version of self, which is the eternal witness, or what people call the I thought, the silent watcher, the awareness, that which is aware, that can't be defined, but it's taken to be a real thing. And this is when it becomes much more subtle, and this is when it becomes much more inescapable, because we've escaped out from the person, but there's a very inescapable quality. There's a different kind of emotional charge that, let's say, belongs to the witness, that belongs to the eternal subject, that kind of transcends completely the story of this person, but is still experienced here. The observer, the witness, is a thought, is an afterthought. The observer is something that is added to reality, and that is added to experience, and suggesting this experience belongs to that which is witnessing, that which is watching. It can't be found in experience. If the eternal witness is everywhere and everything, then it isn't anywhere. It doesn't exist. It doesn't exist separate from what is. It doesn't exist separate from this experience. It's not hiding back here. It's not hiding behind the appearances or the sensations. Inescapable. It's a very subtle attempt to escape from experience reality, to separate from or take a position as something. If there's a witness, if there's a watcher, if there's an awareness suggests there is that which is aware and then something that it's aware of. It's a duality. And if you pay close attention, this added to experience, it comes after what is, it comes after experience. There's really nothing there. I can say it that way, but it's not like that. It's paradoxical. any statement I make saying that something's not there isn't entirely true. And we get to the point now where it just becomes a complete paradox and impossible to talk about. But if you pay close attention, when I pay close attention, that which is aware, the separate witness that is aware of this experience, isn't there, it can't be found. It's a thought, a very subtle kind of thought, but it's a thought. But when that it's seen that, or it's clear that that was never there, that was never there in the first place, still it leaves behind a flavour, like an emotional charge, like an emotional kind of flavour of the eternal witness that is the result of something which was never there in the first place. And it's strange. I went through a period of initially being here, the one that was looking out at reality, to becoming the one that was looking in at reality from out there and in here, in a sense. And in a sense, the environment becomes the body, becomes the extension of the body. And the emotional charge, the emotional residue of, in the memories, let's say, in the sense I described before of the witness, can be felt in the environment, can be felt everywhere, not just inside the body. It's like the body is the environment is an extension of the body. And there's a different type of sorrow that comes with letting go of the witness. I remember in the journal notes I wrote, I said there is something like I said, a dreadful love fills the universe. It's a more profound kind of fear, a more profound, a deeper kind of dread or terror that comes when the witness is seen to be just another thought. It's like the attachment to that is viscerally stronger than the attachment to this individual lifetime. But if we're honest with ourselves, the witness is a position. It's a separation. It's not immersion. It's not oneness. It's holding a point of view, holding a position, or adding something to reality or experience that isn't actually there. It's an assumption. Like I said, it's the most fundamental aspect of self. It's what the self is built upon. It's the baseline of self, in a sense. And with the dropping of that illusion, you kind of lose some of the qualities of escapism for a while that come with the initial awakening. And now you kind of lose a lot of that expansiveness turns out to just be a kind of assumption about the way things are, if I could say it like that. An assumption of what infinite actually is, an assumption of the qualities of experience that aren't actually here, or at least we don't have access to that yet. Like the eternal witness, the watcher, the silent watcher, is subtly a time thing. It subtly exists in time, subtly exists in space or distance. It's a very subtle duality that's really easy to overlook. And I think until the insight deepens, at least I assumed that it was there after the initial clarity, or during the initial clarity, or with that. But it wasn't there. It came afterwards. It was added to. It was like, it's kind of like a reflex of the self. Some of the self is seen through, and it just drops back into a bigger self for a while. And something in us doesn't want to accept that this is it. This is all there is in our experience right now. This part of ourself doesn't want to accept that and wants to believe that there's something else, there's something more to me that's infinite by my conditions and by my terms. That's stable by my conditions and my terms, and belongs to me. If that's the case, then why can't we find it? If not for the thought. It's a subtle pulling back from experience, assuming that there's something behind it. There's some stable constant that's manifesting all of this, that's seemingly separate from it. And like I said, for me this is when it became the most scary, the most frightening, because there's no escape. There's nowhere to expand out into. You're almost kind of doing the opposite. You're almost moving inward. You're moving more directly into this. You're confronting this without having something behind it that's holding it. Something behind it that's giving it some sort of stability or continuity. It's not being comfortable with the paradox. It's not being comfortable with not being in control. It's not being comfortable with the idea of death, or the idea of non-existence from a point of view that assumes that it knows what death and non-existence are. And even though in my experience now I can't find the witness. And it doesn't feel like, in my direct experience, there is a watcher there. There's some entity hiding behind experience, observing it all. But the emotional residue that is created from that illusion is still here, is still echoing like a ghost. It's still being released into experience. And it happens in cycles. So it kind of comes up like a memory, like I explained before, like an emotional flavor memory. And the very, very subtle tendency to want to hold that, to continue that flavor, to capture it, to capture the essence of the witness. And then that tendency phases itself out, that tendency disappears as an illusion with that kind of emotional memory. And then it kind of creates more of it after that realization that it can't be captured, it's not really here. And every time that cycle repeats itself, it becomes less and less personal. It's a very subtle tendency to make experience personal, to make experience belong to something, but at the same time not knowing what the something is. It's much less obvious that I don't know how to describe this. It's kind of like, I think I know what I am. That's the kind of phrase you could use to describe it. I think I know what I am. And that attempt to hold on creates suffering. And it's kind of like the form of suffering, the baseline form of suffering upon which all other sufferings are built up in this personal form. Yet, just because the belief in the illusion is gone, doesn't mean the illusion itself, or the components that make up that illusion, or the components that once convinced us that the illusion was real, aren't still in our experience and can't still be experienced for what they are. And again, it becomes less heavy and more like a play, more like just play. it does feel heavy for a while when the eternal self is seen to be yet another subtle thought, yet another illusion. But like I explained about in my experience, these cycles that just do themselves, the more that cycle, let's say, loops through and repeats, the more playful it becomes, the less of the identification there is with that, the more it can be enjoyed as just the play of the universe. And that heaviness comes out. And that heaviness that was created by identification is just released. And the more and more it becomes clear that what this is can't be grasped. What we are can't be understood. It's not on that level. It doesn't exist in that dimension. It's unknowable paradox, yet already known. Even paradox can't even describe it. You can't find any of it. You can't find anything. There's nothing to grab onto. Other than illusion. It's weird, but that's where the freedom is. That's why it's free. Because it can't be boxed in, it can't be defined, it can't be held onto. It doesn't have to be real or unreal, it doesn't have to be a thing, it doesn't have to be a position. It doesn't have to be infinite in our idea of infinite or what infinite is. And it's inescapable, and it doesn't have to be escaped from. Because if you feel like you need to escape, then you're separate again. And for me, these realizations produce the most pronounced dread, the most pronounced terror, the most terrifying, they were the scariest, the most intense dark night stuff, if I'm to put it that way. Because we're going directly to the fundamental root of identity, where it all comes from. Beyond a certain point there isn't any control or any understanding whatsoever, because there doesn't need to be, because it's too free for that. Reality is too liberated to have to be understood or have to be controlled or have to be witnessed or have to be changing or unchanging. And going there will show you what you're clinging onto, in what way you're clinging onto this experience, or where the identity lies in this experience, and what's left. Anyway, that'll do for now.